The girl already knew her mother was on the living room floor, barely breathing, and she was using the police as her only safe way back to that house. It was late afternoon in Savannah, America. Officer Derek Sloan and his partner, Officer Marina Cole, were driving a slow loop past a corner store and a quiet bus stop. The street looked normal, bikes against fences, a few people with grocery bags, but Derek noticed a girl near the curb, crying so hard her shoulders jumped. Her eyes were red, and her hands kept twisting the sleeves of a thin sweater until her fingers shook. The patrol car stopped. The girl didn't run. She stepped forward like she had been waiting for this one chance. Her voice was small and broken, but her request was simple. Follow me home. She didn't ask for a ride or a phone call. She wanted them behind her, close enough to see what she feared. Derek scanned the area for an adult, anyone searching, anyone calling a name, but there was nobody. A man at the store door glanced over and looked away. Marina got out, lowered herself to the girl's height, and kept her tone soft. After a few breaths, the girl said her name, Layla Hart. She pointed down the street and said her house was close. Then she swallowed and added, something bad happened inside. She didn't explain more, but her face said she wasn't guessing. She was remembering. Derek radioed that they were doing a welfare check and asked for medical help to be ready. Marina stayed close to Lila as they walked, keeping the child between them. Lila moved fast, not like a kid playing, but like someone trying to outrun a thought. She kept glancing behind her as if she expected someone else to appear. 3 blocks later, they reached a pale blue house with a crooked mailbox and a porch swing on squeaky chains. The yard was patchy, and a toy ball sat near the steps like it had been dropped mid-game. The front door was cracked open, just a thin line of darkness inside. An open door can be an accident, or it can be a warning. Layla stopped at the bottom step and shook her head. Tears started again. I don't want to go first, she whispered. I already saw her, and I ran. Marina moved in front of Lila without being told, turning her body into a shield. Derek nodded once, and they moved together. Inside, the air smelled like spilled coffee and something sharp like metal. The curtains were half pulled, letting in a gray slice of daylight. The room looked disturbed in a way that didn't fit a normal mess. A lamp was tipped over with its shade bent. A small table had been dragged away from the wall. A picture frame lay broken near the sofa, glass scattered across the rug. On the wall, a family photo hung crooked, like someone had brushed it aside in anger. Then they saw her. Kendra Hart was lying on the rug, half turned toward the sofa. Her face was swollen, her hair loose and tangled, and her breathing was thin and uneven. Marina dropped to her knees, checked for a pulse, and looked up at Derek with a look that meant, move now. Derek called for an ambulance with a steady voice, giving the address and the need for speed. Lila stood in the doorway, trembling, her hands clamped together like she was holding herself in one piece. That's my mom, she said, so quiet it was almost just air. Derek guided her back out to the porch, because no child should stand over a scene like that. He sat her on the porch swing and kept his voice calm. You did the right thing, he told her. You did the brave thing. To keep her grounded, Derek asked a couple of small questions. Did she have a phone? No. Did she have a safe neighbor? Not today. Lila hugged a worn backpack to her chest and said she had $18 inside from a school fundraiser. She offered it with a child's logic, like money could fix what was broken. Derek gently told her to keep it. We've got this, he said. Just stay with us. The ambulance arrived with lights flashing across the pale blue siding. Paramedics moved quickly into the house and the porch filled with boots on wood and radios clicking. Lila watched, frozen, as they brought out a stretcher and lifted Kendra onto it. Kendra didn't open her eyes, but she was still breathing, and that small fact changed the air around them. Right then, everything shifted. As the stretcher rolled toward the ambulance, Derek stayed beside Lila so she wouldn't feel left behind. Marina returned to the porch and told Lila that her mother was going to the hospital in Jacksonville, America, and that Lila would go too, safely. Lila nodded once, stiff and serious, like she was trying to be older than she was. Before the ambulance doors closed, Derek looked back at the house, the open door, the broken frame, the crooked photo. He didn't say it out loud, but he understood what the scene suggested. Somebody had wanted control, somebody had wanted silence. And a crying girl on a street corner had just ruined that plan. The most shocking part was what Lila said as soon as the hospital doors closed behind them. She didn't need anyone to figure out. What happened? She already knew who did it, and she knew it was about money, hundreds of thousands of dollars that her father wanted so badly he was willing to leave her mother half dead on the floor. The hospital in Jacksonville, America, smelled like disinfectant and warm plastic. The lights were so bright they made every face look pale, even the healthy ones. Officer Derek Sloan sat with Lila Hart in the waiting room, close enough that she wouldn't feel alone, but not so close that she'd feel trapped. The chair swallowed her small body. Her feet didn't reach the floor, and she kept swinging them without noticing, like her legs were trying to walk away while the rest of her stayed frozen. Across from them, a vending machine hummed and blinked, offering chips and candy as if life could still be simple. Marina Cole had stepped away to speak with the nurse and the doctor and to give the first report. Derek watched the doors that led deeper into the hospital, the way people watch the ocean during a storm, knowing something is happening out there but unable to touch it. Lila stared at the vending machine as if it might suddenly give her news. Her eyes were glossy, but she was trying hard not to cry again, like tears had become a chore. Derek leaned forward and spoke gently, keeping his voice low. "Your mom is in the right place," he said. "The doctors are working on her. She's alive, Lila." He chose that word on purpose, alive, because it was a rope someone could hold on to. Lila's lips trembled. She pressed her knuckles to her mouth. "Is she going to wake up?" she asked. Her voice had the sound of a kid trying to be brave and failing by a tiny inch. "She's going to fight," Derek said, steady and sure. "And we're going to help her. You're not alone in this." He didn't promise a perfect ending, because he couldn't. But he promised presence, because that was something he could give. For a few minutes, Lila just sniffed and wiped her cheeks with the sleeve of her sweater. She blinked hard and looked down at her hands. Her fingers were still shaking. Derek could see she was holding something back, not just fear, but knowledge. Some kids don't know what to say. Some kids know exactly what to say, but don't want the words to become real. Lila looked up, and when she spoke again, her voice dropped so low it almost disappeared. "It was my dad," she whispered. Derek didn't jerk or gasp. He didn't rush her. He let the sentence sit in the air like a heavy object placed carefully on a table. "Okay," he said quietly, because okay meant he heard her without pushing her. Lila's eyes filled again. "He wanted money," she said. "A lot of money." She swallowed and stared at the floor tiles as if they were safer than Derek's face. He kept saying it was his. He kept saying my mom was keeping it from him. At that moment, Marina returned, her expression firm but tired. She sat on the other side of Lila, so the girl was between two adults who wouldn't let her fall. Marina's voice was soft, but she didn't hide the truth. "The doctor says your mom has serious injuries," she told Lila, "but she's being treated right now. You did the right thing by getting help." Lila nodded, but her nod was small and shaky. Marina looked at Derek, then back to Lila. "Tell us what you know, honey," she said. "Anything you say can help keep you and your mom safe." Lila took a breath that hitched halfway through. "My mom's parents died last year," she said. "Grandma and Grandpa Weston. They had a will." She paused, searching for words that a kid could carry. "It said the house and everything, the savings and the land. It goes to me when I turn 18. Mom said it's for my future. She said she was in charge until then, to protect it." Marina's face tightened. "Do you know how much the savings were?" she asked, careful not to sound like she was interrogating a child. Lila blinked. "Mom said about $420,000, she said, slow and clear, like she'd heard it enough times that it stuck. $420,000. And the house. And there's a piece of land outside the city that Grandpa bought a long time ago." She rubbed her thumb against her finger, a nervous habit. Dad got really angry when he found out the will didn't put his name on it. Derek's stomach sank. That wasn't a simple argument. That was a motive with numbers attached. Marina reached for a small notebook and wrote the names down: Weston, Hart, the amount, because details mattered, especially when someone had tried to erase them with violence. Lila continued, and her voice became even smaller. "He kept telling Mom to sign papers," she said. "I saw them on the kitchen table once. He said if she signed, everything could be fixed. Mom said no." Lila's eyes darted toward the hallway doors again. "Mom said it's not his money. She said it belongs to me one day." Marina nodded slowly. "And today?" she asked. "What happened today, right before you ran outside?" Lila's hands started shaking worse. Derek could see the memory hitting her again, like a wave. "He came home angry," she whispered. "He smelled like beer." He was yelling before he even took his shoes off. Her voice cracked. He said he needed it now. He said he had people waiting, and Mom was ruining everything. Lila squeezed her backpack strap, pulling it tight. Mom told him to leave. She told him she would call the police if he didn't stop. She paused, and her breathing turned fast. Derek held up his hand slightly, like a stop sign for panic, and he spoke gently. "Take your time," he said. "You're safe here." Layla swallowed hard. "He hit her," she said. "Not like an accident. Like he meant it." She stared at the floor so she wouldn't have to see their faces. "She fell. He kept hitting her." I screamed. I tried to pull him off her and he yelled at me. He said I should mind my own business. Her eyes squeezed shut. Then he grabbed his jacket and left. He didn't help her. He didn't call anyone. He just left. Marina's jaw clenched, but she kept her voice gentle. "Did he say where he was going?" she asked. Lila shook her head. "No," she whispered. "He just ran out." I looked at Mom, and she wasn't getting up. Her eyes were open, but not really. I got scared. I ran outside. I saw your police car, and I thought, if I go back alone, I might not come out again. Derek felt something tighten in his chest, the kind of feeling that comes when a child has to be smarter than an adult. He nodded slowly, choosing his words like stepping stones. "You did the bravest thing you could do," he said. "You saved your mom's life. You hear me? You saved her." Lila's face crumpled, and she finally let herself cry again, not loud, not dramatic, just steady tears that made her shoulders shake. Marina reached for a box of tissues and placed it on Lila's lap. Derek kept his posture calm and solid, like a wall that wouldn't move. Outside the waiting room, the hospital kept running, phones ringing, shoes squeaking, distant voices calling names, but inside that small circle of chairs, the truth had landed. A man had chosen money over family, dollars over love, control over life. And a young girl, terrified and shaken, had done the one thing he didn't expect. She had brought the law home with her. That morning wasn't the arrest itself. It was the calm way Caleb Hart had already started talking about money on the phone. Like his wife in a hospital bed was just a problem to solve, and his daughter's future was a prize to grab. Rain fell in Baton Rouge, America, like the sky was scrubbing the streets. The pavement shone under streetlights, and the gutters carried little rivers of brown water. At 7:18 a.m., Officer Marina Cole's phone buzzed with a message from a local unit. A motel clerk had called in a tip about a man paying cash, refusing housekeeping, and acting jumpy every time a patrol car passed. The clerk had seen a flyer Marina sent to nearby departments and recognized the face right away. The man was using a different name at check-in, but the eyes matched, the jaw matched, the tense posture matched. The clerk didn't sound like someone chasing drama. He sounded scared. Marina showed the message to Officer Derek Sloan as they stood in a hospital hallway in Jacksonville, America. Derek had just walked out of the waiting room after checking on Lila Hart, who had finally fallen asleep in a chair with her backpack hugged to her chest. Her cheeks were still damp. The vending machine hummed as if nothing had changed, but everything had changed. Marina's message felt like a door opening. They didn't waste time. Detectives in Savannah had already pushed Caleb Hart's photo and details out to the surrounding areas. Marina called the number back, asked for the motel's address, and confirmed what the clerk had seen. A man who looked exactly like Caleb, a man who kept peeking through the curtains, a man who paid in crisp bills and avoided any form of ID. The clerk also mentioned something else that made Marina's voice sharpen. Caleb had asked if the motel had a back exit. A few minutes later, Baton Rouge officers pulled the motel's security footage. The camera above the office showed the man's face clearly when he leaned forward to sign the form. He'd written Miles Carter, but the camera didn't care about ink. The footage captured the same nervous habit too, Caleb rubbing his thumb against his index finger, over and over, like he was counting money that wasn't there. The clip was sent to Marina and Derek. It was him. No question. The plan was simple. Approach quietly, keep it controlled, and make sure there was no chance for him to run. A small team assembled in the motel parking lot, rain ticking against their jackets. Their shoes splashed through shallow puddles, and the air smelled like wet asphalt and old cigarette smoke. The motel itself was the kind of place people used when they wanted to disappear for a night-faded sign. Buzzing light, curtains that never fully closed. They checked the room number. The clerk handed over the registry page and shook his head. "He's been staring at his phone all morning," he said. "Kept saying something about money being locked up, like he was mad at the world. One officer took a position near the back stairs. Another stayed near the office. Marina and a Baton Rouge detective walked toward the room with Derek just behind, all of them moving with the same quiet purpose. A normal person opens a door without thinking. A hunted person opens a door like it's a trap. When Marina knocked, there was a pause long enough to feel the tension stretch. Then the deadbolt clicked. The chain slid. The door opened a few inches. Caleb Hart stood there wearing jeans and a wrinkled gray hoodie. His hair looked like he'd run his hands through it 100 times. His eyes flicked from Marina's face to Derek's and then past them, checking the hallway, checking the exit, checking for gaps. He didn't ask what they wanted. He didn't pretend it was a misunderstanding. He went straight to denial, fast and sharp. "I didn't do anything," he said. Marina didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Then come explain why Kendra is in a hospital bed," she answered, steady as stone. Caleb's jaw tightened. "This is family business," he snapped. "You can't just—" He moved like he was going to slam the door shut and lock them out, like a door could erase what he'd done. But Derek was ready. His boot caught the door before it could close. The wood jolted. The frame groaned. The chain rattled. Caleb shoved again, but it was useless. The door stopped moving, and for one long second, it felt like the whole world had decided it was done letting him run. "Step back," the detective ordered. Caleb's breathing turned loud. He looked past them again, like a cornered animal searching for the one crack in the fence. Then his shoulders dropped a fraction, not from regret but from calculation. He lifted his hands slowly, like he had no choice. They brought him into the hallway, turned him toward the wall, and cuffed him. His wrists looked too small for the metal, or maybe the metal looked too honest for him. Doors along the motel row cracked open as guests peeked out. A woman in a robe stared with wide eyes. A man holding a coffee cup paused mid-sip. Caleb tried to straighten his back as if pride could protect him. "This is ridiculous," he barked. "She's fine. She's dramatic. She wouldn't just hand over what's mine, so Marina cut him off. It was never yours," she said. "Not the money. Not the house. Not her body. Not her life." Caleb's face flashed with anger, and for a moment the mask slipped. "She was supposed to sign," he hissed, as if that explained everything. "It's sitting there, locked away, and she thinks she can—" The detective looked at Marina, and Marina nodded. They'd just been handed another piece of proof. Motive, again, spoken in his own words. They searched his pockets. They found $1,300 in cash, folded tight. They found a cheap burner phone. They found a paper with scribbled numbers and the words, "Sell fast," underlined twice. They found a motel key, and nothing else that looked like a man planning to go back home. He wasn't thinking about apologies. He was thinking about escape. At the station, they pulled phone logs from the burner. There were repeated calls to a number labeled E. The calls were short, but frequent. When they traced the number, it connected to a man living in Europe named Emo Varga. No clear crime in the calls themselves, but the timing and pattern mattered. It looked like Caleb was trying to move something quickly: money, property, anything he could touch before the law closed in. Marina sat across from Caleb in the interview room, rainwater drying on her sleeves. "You called Europe 8 times since last night," she said. "What were you trying to sell?" Caleb sneered. "I can call whoever I want." Derek watched quietly, letting Caleb talk himself into corners. Sometimes the truth isn't pulled out. Sometimes it stumbles out on its own when a person can't stand silence. Back in Jacksonville, America, the hospital finally allowed Lila to see her mother for a few minutes. Marina and Derek arrived just before the visit, because they didn't want Lila to face that room alone. The hallway outside the ward was quieter than the waiting room, the kind of quiet that makes every sound, every footstep, every cough feel too loud. Kendra lay in the bed with tubes and tape and bruises that looked like storms on her skin. Her eyes were half open but unfocused, like she was swimming up from deep water. Lila stood at the edge of the bed, hands shaking, afraid to touch her at first, afraid her own fingers might hurt her mother. "It's me," Lila whispered. "Mom?" Derek nodded gently. "Go ahead," he said. "Hold her hand." Lila reached out and wrapped her small hand around Kendra's. For a second, nothing happened. Then Kendra's fingers tightened, just enough pressure to say one clear thing without words. "I'm here." "I'm still here." Lila's face crumpled. She leaned forward and cried into the blanket, careful not to tug on any wires. "I'm sorry," she whispered. as if a child could apologize for an adult's cruelty. Kendra tried to speak, but only air came out. Still, she squeezed again, weak but stubborn. It wasn't a full sentence, but it was a promise. Marina watched from the doorway, blinking hard. Derek looked down at his phone and pretended to check a message he didn't have, because sometimes a uniform can't hide what a moment does to a person. Outside, rain kept falling in Baton Rouge, and inside, a mother's hand stayed wrapped around her daughter's like the world's smallest, strongest lifeline. And somewhere in a holding cell, Caleb Hart sat with cuffs replaced by steel doors, realizing too late that the door he tried to slam had finally closed on him instead. Caleb Hart didn't just lose his freedom, he lost every chance to touch the inheritance he chased, because the court protected the money and the house for the very child he tried to scare into silence. Months later, the courthouse in Charleston, America, felt colder than the weather outside. The ceiling was high, the benches were hard, and every sound seemed to echo heels on tile, papers turning, a cough that didn't know where to go. Officer Marina Cole sat near the aisle with Officer Derek Sloan beside her, and Lila Hart sat between them, holding a small stuffed dog a nurse had given her at the hospital. She kept rubbing one ear of the toy until the fabric began to curl. She didn't look around like most kids would. She stared straight ahead, as if moving her eyes might make the past rush back in. Kendra Hart sat a few rows ahead with a soft brace around her wrist and faint bruises still visible near her cheekbone. She looked stronger than she had in the hospital, but not fine, not back to normal. She moved carefully, like her body had learned a new rule. Don't trust sudden moments. Every time someone shifted in their seat, her shoulders tensed. Still, she kept her chin up because she had decided on something important in the weeks after the attack. She wasn't going to let fear write the last page. When the case began, the evidence arrived piece by piece, steady and heavy. Medical reports described injuries in clean words that still made the room tighten. Photographs showed the living room in Savannah, America, the broken frame, the tipped lamp, the crooked family photo, and the stain on the rug that no one wanted to name out loud. Phone logs showed calls and movements, and the motel footage from Baton Rouge, America, showed Caleb using a fake name, paying cash, and trying to slip into the shadows. Then the will was read, and the real reason stood up in the open. Kendra's parents had left their property and savings to Lila, with Kendra as guardian until Lila turned 18. The numbers were said plainly without drama, because they didn't need drama. The inheritance was worth about $420,000, plus the value of the house and a small piece of land outside the city. The money sounded like a fortune in a courtroom where everyone wore tired faces. But to Kendra, it was more than money. It was her parents' last act of love, designed to protect Lila from exactly the kind of person Caleb became when he felt entitled. Caleb Hart sat at the defense table with his hair cut short and his jaw tight. He avoided looking at Kendra for long, but he did glance at Lila once, the way a person glances at something they think belongs to them. Lila didn't look back. She held her stuffed dog and kept her eyes forward. Marina's hand rested near Lila's shoulder, not touching, but close enough to be felt. Caleb's lawyer tried to soften the story. He used words like stress, pressure, and money troubles. He tried to make it sound like a bad night that got out of hand, like an argument that turned into a mistake. He talked about how Caleb panicked and made poor choices. He even suggested Kendra was unreasonable for not cooperating, as if refusing to sign away a child's future was the real offense. The judge didn't lean back through any of it. The judge leaned forward, elbows near the bench, eyes steady. When the lawyer finished, the courtroom went quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your skin feel too thin. The judge spoke clearly, and every word landed where it was meant to land. This was not an accident, the judge said. This was violence used as a tool. It was used to force control. It was used to take property from the people it was meant to protect. Caleb's face tightened, and for a moment, he looked like he wanted to argue, like he wanted to say the world had treated him unfairly. But the world wasn't listening anymore. The world had listened to Lila's tears, to Kendra's injuries, to the evidence. The judge listed the charges and the facts. The sentence that followed was long years that sounded heavy in the air when the number was read. Lila didn't cheer. She didn't smile. She simply took one slow breath and then another, like someone who had been holding their lungs tight for months. Derek watched her and felt something loosen inside his own chest. Marina blinked hard and looked at the floor for a second, as if she needed to anchor herself. Some victories don't feel like parties. Some victories feel like finally being allowed to sleep. After the trial, Kendra's recovery continued in quiet steps. Therapy appointments filled her calendar. Mornings were stiff. Certain sounds made her flinch, but she kept going anyway. She learned how to breathe through panic. She learned how to walk into a room without scanning every corner. She learned, slowly, that her life didn't have to be shaped like fear. And when she was strong enough to sign papers again, she signed the ones that mattered most. The divorce filing. The divorce wasn't loud. There was no screaming scene, no big speech. It was simply a door closing firmly forever. The court placed protections around Kendra and Lila, and the inheritance stayed where it was supposed to stay, guarded, documented, and out of Caleb's reach. For the first time in a long time, Kendra felt the ground under her feet stop shifting. A year later, Kendra and Lila lived in Nashville, America, in a different house. It wasn't huge. It didn't look like a mansion or a dream on a magazine cover, but it felt safe. The kitchen was bright in the mornings. The backyard smelled like fresh-cut grass. The porch swing still squeaked, but now it squeaked with normal life, neighbors waving, birds on the fence, weekends that weren't full of dread. Kendra had rebuilt her life carefully, the way you rebuild something fragile, one solid piece at a time. She met a man named Evan Brooks, a quiet, steady person who asked questions instead of making demands. He didn't raise his voice to get what he wanted. He didn't slam doors. He didn't treat love like a bargain. When he hugged Lila, he always asked first. When he fixed the loose porch step, he did it without announcing it like a favor that had to be repaid. One evening, as the sun lowered behind the trees, Kendra sat on the porch with Lila and handed her a small envelope. Lila turned it over in her hands, curious. "What's this?" she asked. Kendra smiled, softer than she used to smile, but real. "A bank statement," she said. "I put $50 in an account the day you saved my life. I kept adding to it whenever I could. It's not just money, sweetheart. It's proof. Proof that your future is still yours." Lila stared at the paper as if it were a map out of a dark place. Then she leaned her head on her mother's shoulder, and Kendra rested her cheek gently on Lila's hair. The porch light flicked on as night came in, warm and steady. Far away, Caleb sat behind prison walls with nothing but time and regret. And in America, in a quiet neighborhood where the doors stayed locked for safety, not fear, a mother and daughter finally lived in a house where pain didn't have the final word.